Everyone, we're going to talk about the environment today. We're going to look at our unit talking about the whale's gift, why saving them saves us all. I find the idea of a whale's gift being quite an interesting thing because it comes through the death of a whale that the gift is given to the creatures that are around it. And we're going to find out about that as we go through our article today. But it's extremely fascinating, wouldn't you say, Mike?
Absolutely. And this is, of course, very different from the gift that whales used to give people when we were hunting them for their oil and using body parts to make things like women's corsets and other stuff. Now, of course, hunting whales is something that most of the countries in the world have deemed illegal. A few of them still do it. Norway, Japan, Iceland, I believe, still hunt whales occasionally. But we're not talking about that. We're not talking about humans hunting whales in order to harvest them or get things out of them. We're kind of talking here about the natural process, the circle of life, natural process of life. And in doing that, in sort of living its life naturally and dying, most importantly, naturally, whales can help us out. So we might not even see them, realize this is happening, know this is happening. In fact, in many cases, we couldn't see or know because it happens deep, deep below the surface of the ocean. But there are good things, this is a weird thing to say, there are good things that happen to us in the world when whales die, but we're not making it happen, so that's okay.
That sounds like the butterfly effect,
It's kind of interesting, right?
Like if a butterfly flaps its wings over in eastern China,
It'll cause a tornado in the South Atlantic.
It sounds a bit like this.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into our story. Let's listen to our article one time.
The vast ocean stages countless miracles of life, but none are quite as awe-inspiring as the phenomenon of a whale fall. When a giant whale reaches the end of its life, its immense body gently descends and eventually lands in the inky abyss. This moment, which might seem like the end, ignites a burst of new life on the ocean floor. Deep beneath the ocean's surface, where sunlight is unable to venture and nutrients are scarce, a whale fall is like an oasis in a barren landscape. Over decades, even centuries, the remains of a single whale can sustain thousands of organisms, from bacteria to larger marine creatures. This process not only supports the complex food web, but also enriches the biodiversity of the deep sea. Throughout their lives, whales absorb an average of 33 tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, storing it within their bodies, much like the great trees of the forest. When a whale perishes and sinks to the ocean floor, the absorbed carbon goes down with it. If undisturbed, this carbon can remain sequestered for hundreds or even thousands of years, playing a significant role in combating global warming. However, human interference through commercial whaling and habitat disruption has led to a rapid decline in whale populations. This not only threatens the whale fall rate and geographical distribution, but also endangers species that rely solely on these carcasses for survival. Moreover, the reduction in carbon storage is equivalent to cutting down millions of large trees, magnifying the climate crisis. It is imperative that we advocate for the protection of whales by supporting whale conservation efforts and promoting sustainable practices. This is not just because they are wise and beautiful animals, but because in death they leave behind a valuable gift for our world.
So whales. Whales living, whales dying. Whales are fascinating creatures. And honestly, where would you see a whale? Well, you probably see it in the vast ocean. The vast ocean stages countless miracles of life, but none are quite as awe-inspiring as the phenomenon of a whale fall. So vast, when you say the word, you almost want to extend it and go vast. It means very broad, very wide open, very large and open space is something vast. And if you think of the ocean is vast, it's huge. And it stages countless miracles of life. It means it sets up and allows to happen countless miracles of life. And that means that every day in the ocean, all these different things are happening on its stage. It's not what it means here, but it allows it to take place. That's what the staging is. But none of these things, none of these miracles of life are quite as awe-inspiring or quite as amazing, as quite as, making you stop and be mesmerized, as we've talked about before, as the phenomenon of a whale fall. So whale fall is what?
When a giant whale reaches the end of its life, its immense body gently descends and eventually lands in the inky abyss.
What a fun sentence you have there.
That is a nice sentence, and that basically describes what a whale fall is. So it's basically a whale dying, and then what happens to its body after its death. So when a giant whale reaches the end of its life, I'm not sure, I guess whales have heart attacks when they're swimming around or something. Whales reach a certain age and, die a natural death of old age. This happens to most animals, I would imagine, in different situations. But then it dies, and its immense body gently descends. Yes, they don't have a whale funeral. They don't put it in a coffin, and everyone stands around and makes a speech and do things like humans would do. It just dies in the ocean where it's lived its whole life. And of course, things that die in the ocean will float possibly for a while, but eventually they will get filled with water. The air inside them will be released, and then they will start to sink. This, of course, happens to human bodies. Almost anything that ends up in the ocean will eventually sink. And as it sinks, it descends, all right? To sink is basically to descend through water or through air, but descend is a more general term just to mean to go down. If you climb up a mountain, unless you want to live on top of the mountain for the rest of your life, you will eventually descend the mountain. You will go down. The opposite would be ascend. To go up is ascend. To go down is descend. An airplane will ascend when it takes off, and at the end of the journey, when it reaches the destination, it will descend, it will go down, reach the ground, and eventually land. So this body, I should say, will sink. It will gently descend, or sink, we could say, and land in the inky abyss. Ooh, I like that. An abyss is basically a very deep chasm or place. It's very far below the surface or surrounding terrain or land. If you think of the Grand Canyon, you could probably describe that as an abyss. But to really see an abyss, you'd have to kind of drain the oceans and see how far down the ocean is. If you've ever been swimming off an island and, you look down and you can see some sand or coral, and then you kind of reach that shelf, that area where the land or the seafloor, I should say, just drops away from you. It's a little bit of a scary feeling, isn't it?
You feel like you're dangling over the abyss.
You feel like you're dangling and you're worried what's down in that abyss, like giant sharks or
whale bodies,
squid that are going to drag you down to this deep, deep place far below the surface, this abyss. And we say inky because it's very dark down there. It's kind of the dark blue color that we associate with ink. All right, so we're just comparing the color of ink, that dark bluish black, to the dark bluish black you see when you look down into the deepest parts of the ocean, where of course light doesn't really reach much more than a kilometer or two below the surface of the ocean. So it's very dark and very deep, and that's where the body will eventually land, kind of like, the Titanic eventually landed down in the inky abyss after it sank.
It did, and this moment when the body lands, which might seem like the end, ignites a burst of new life on the ocean floor. So when this body descends down to the bottom, it lands on the bottom on the ocean floor, it sits there, and it starts something. It doesn't just start something, but it's almost like a fire just going off. It ignites a burst of new life on the ocean floor. So you can ignite an engine, you can ignite an engine ignites the fuel and creates the propulsion forward of the car when you're driving it. There is that kind of boom, boom, boom explosion going on. When you put a gasoline on a bunch of wood and you light a match, you ignite it. It sets it off very rapidly and creates kind of like a burst of something. And that's great because they add that word there afterward, a burst of new life on the ocean floor. Here, I don't think they're necessarily talking about, all of a sudden whale babies are born. I think they're talking about the fact that all sorts of creatures are about to go over to the ocean floor where this whale body is. And it's deep beneath the ocean surface where sunlight is unable to venture and nutrients are scarce. So the creatures that are down there need some food. So a whale fall is like an oasis in a barren landscape. So in this area, deep beneath the ocean surface, light isn't around. You're not seeing things. You don't have a lot of critters around as it goes deeper and deeper. The critters that are there are always scavenging for food because they have a hard time to find stuff around. There's nothing really around. So nutrients, the things that would be their sources of food, are scarce. They are barely existent. There isn't much around. But the whale fall, when it lands there, is like a desert has suddenly created its little oasis in it. So a barren landscape is something that we're mentioning here. A barren landscape is like a desert, a place where nothing grows, a place that's dry, a place that's empty. There's nothing really of life happening in that area. A large expanse of it is a barren landscape. A woman can be called, it can be said a woman is barren when she cannot have children. But if a place is barren, it doesn't have much in it. So an oasis in a barren landscape, in a desert, is like a spot where a little bit of water has managed to stay, some area of green has managed to grow, a few trees have managed to be there. It's like this magical place. You think it's a mirage when you see it, but it's this lovely, amazing place. And it can also just be a place that is like this in your life. So if you go to the library and you have this one little corner in the library where you like to sit and read a book and nobody ever bothers you, that might be your oasis. It's your special place that feels like this wonderful, amazing spot out of nowhere. And a whale fall creates this in the ocean floor. It's pretty amazing.
It is, because there's not much down there. As Leah explained, it's barren, it's lifeless on the ocean floor. Nothing grows, very little to eat. And suddenly there's this whale body there, and all of these different animals can suddenly come over and have a source of food and all sorts of stuff. In the same way that, if an elephant dies in the middle of the African plain, hyenas, wild dogs, vultures, all sorts of insects as well will come along and feast on the dead remains of this animal. We should also mention oasis. The plural would be oases. O-A-S-E-S would be the plural of that. And yeah, those are those areas in a desert where there will actually be water coming from below the surface of the earth. You might see a palm tree or two, and it's a place where in an area where there is almost no water, you can actually find water and life in that area. Birds and other animals might live around this oasis because there's not much else for them in any other area nearby. Over decades, over 10 years, even centuries, even hundreds of years. Imagine if it's a blue whale, these massive animals that are as big as many buses. It could take a long time for all these little animals on the sea floor to process, to eat this animal, break it down to its bones and whatnot. So it takes a very long time. That's amazing that it can take up over 100 years, which is a century. But the remains, the dead body, right, the what is left of the animal after it dies, the remains of a single whale can sustain or support thousands of organisms, thousands of different types of animals and creatures and life, in other words, from bacteria, very simple, small cellular life, like the bacteria that might cause infections in our body, things that you can't see with your eyes, to larger marine creatures, I'm sure. There are sort of the ocean's version of hyenas. These are your vultures, these larger animals that sort of act as the vacuum cleaners and the cleaning crew of the dry world, of the African world, for example, with hyenas. They have similar things, not in dog form, but in fish form down there that will be happily eating, the rotting dead body of this whale over a long time. And this process not only supports the complex food web, all of these different creatures that eat each other and eat the whale, because, that's another good point. There might be animals there that don't eat the whale. They eat the animals eating the whale, right? So it's basically an area where there's this life where there wouldn't normally be. So it supports this complex food web, this sort of network or organization of all these animals that sort of support and live off each other. But it also enriches the biodiversity of the deep sea. You can bring in new nutrients. You can bring in different things that might not naturally be there. And who knows what other life might take hold around where a whale fall has occurred.
Let's take a little break and listen to our Chinese teacher.
Hello everyone, 我是派老师。今天讲解的是11月21号 Unit 11 The Whale's Gift, Why Saving Them Saves Us All. 这是一篇篇章结构的练习题，介绍的是鲸鱼。我们都知道鲸鱼是非常巨大的生物， 但可能不了解鲸鱼在生态系当中也相当重要。活着的时候，鲸鱼维持生态系的平衡，即使在鲸鱼死后，依然支持着许许多多不同生物的生存，甚至于鲸鱼呢，也是大自然当中很重要的碳汇 carbon sink， 那就犹如大树一般的存在，它们吸纳了许许多多的二氧化碳。好，我们一起来解题吧。解题之前，老师还想要再强调一次，请大家快速的看一下这4到5个选项，心中呢要有个印象，想想哪些句子可以让句子变得完整。那甚至于有时候这些句子一看大概就知道它可能会在文章当中的前中后哪个地方。篇章结构答题原则最重要就是句子要和前后文连贯，所以请大家一定要记得前后连贯，文意通顺。好，我们一起来解题吧。看第一题，这是第一段最后一个句子，我们看一下前后文。前2个句子提到浩瀚的海洋当中上演着无数生命的奇迹，没有一种现象能够像鲸落一样令人敬畏。当一头巨鲸的生命走到了尽头，庞大的身躯就会缓缓的下沉，那最后呢会落在漆黑的深渊当中。空格后面的句子在第2段开头提到，在阳光无法到达、营养素很稀缺的深海当中，鲸落呢其实就很像荒地里的一片绿洲。夹在中间的句子当然要承先启后啦，前面描述的是死亡，后面呢说明的是陨落的鲸鱼，宛如荒地当中的绿洲，又象征着希望。最合适的答案应该是 D This moment which might seem like the end 这个句子。那它所指的就是此刻看似终结，却在海底点燃新生命的火花。所以第一题正确答案选 D。 紧接着请看第2题，请看空格后面的句子。这个过程不仅支撑着复杂的食物网，还丰富了深海的生物多样性。 This process， 它这个句子表示前一个句子和喂养其他海洋生物有关，鲸鱼死亡以后会沉到深海里头，进而让生物的多样性得以维持。所以我们选 A over decades, even centuries 这个句子。这个句子表示在数十年甚至于数百年的时间内，一头鲸鱼的遗体可以养活成千上万的生物，包括细菌还有比较大的海洋生物。那文意前后是连贯的，所以第2题我们选 A。
All right, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be right back. So we've talked about the whale fall, but why is it important to us? Throughout their lives, whales absorb an average of 33 tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, storing it within their bodies, much like the great trees of the forest. So they are holders of carbon dioxide. When you breathe out air from your mouth, you're breathing carbon dioxide out. And if you get too much carbon dioxide, it's really not good for the environment. It needs to be absorbed so that you have more oxygen available, which is better for humans to be able to live on the planet. So we plant trees which absorb carbon dioxide, and it looks like these whales, they absorb quite a bit, 33 tons. So a ton, I think, is 2,000 pounds. Multiply that by 33. That's a heck of a load of carbon dioxide, taking it from the atmosphere, storing it in their bodies, and they are just like the great trees of the forest. When a whale perishes, when a whale dies, it sinks to the ocean floor. All of that carbon dioxide goes down with it. And if you don't mess with that, if it's left undisturbed, this carbon can remain sequestered for hundreds or even thousands of years. And that plays a significant role in combating global warming. Sequestering something means to hold it in place, almost like you're putting it into a room and locking the door. You can
like
also
quarantine.
Yeah,
that was kind of sequestering.
You're sequestering for sure during COVID-19 for sure. Yeah. Could also be being put in jail. But here we're sequestering the carbon. We're holding it in, and it's holding it in for an extended period of time. So all that carbon that's been out in the air is not just being released back out into the air. And that's allowing us to not let the planet warm too quickly, which happens when there's too much carbon dioxide in the air, and that way it combats global warming.
Oh, very, very interesting. All these things that happen below the surface of the ocean that we have no idea about.
Really?
However, it goes on to say human interference through commercial whaling and habitat disruption has led to a rapid decline in whale populations. Yes, we've been hunting whales. People were hunting whales a lot in the 19th century, especially for oil. Now we don't do that so much, but with the hunting that did go on, and whales, of course, not being known for having lots of babies quickly, the number of whales out there in the wild has gone down a lot from what it was 100, 200 years ago, especially 200 or more years ago. And this, of course, is human interference. When you cause trouble, when you block something from happening naturally, when you're getting in the way, you're causing interference, okay? So if you're trying to talk to someone on the phone and someone next to you in the same room is talking at the same time, they're causing interference. When you're trying to have a discussion with someone and another person who's not involved keeps kind of sticking their nose into your business, that would be causing interference. So it's disrupting the natural course of things. And of course, humans disrupt the natural course of nature in all sorts of ways.
Yeah.
And we cause all sorts of trouble by doing that. In this case, commercial whaling. Whaling is the term we use for the hunting of whales. Commercial whaling, meaning you're hunting them not just to eat them, as some native groups would do, but they would maybe kill a few whales a year. Of course, with these big ships and these factory ships, they're killing, 5 or 10 whales maybe a day or something like that, and they're selling them. That's the commercial part of it. And habitat disruption, right? We fish in areas. We change the temperature of the oceans in areas because of human activity, and this causes great changes to the whales and how they live and where they go and how many babies they have and all sorts of different things. Even noise, I think, the noise of our ocean-going boats and ships can disturb whales too. So all of this sort of trouble brought by humans has led to a rapid decline or fall in whale populations, very much fewer now than there were before. This not only threatens the whale fall rate, fewer whales means fewer whales dying, and geographical distribution. Maybe the whale falls now are mostly found in the South Atlantic or the South Pacific, areas far away from where humans are, which again is not normal in the long sweep of animal history. Geographical meaning about geography, all right? So when we're talking about geographical information, we're talking about information based on the science of the Earth, the shape of the Earth, the form of the Earth, and changes in the Earth. Geography is everything from maps and flags and countries and borders to mountains and lakes and rivers, basically the study of the Earth and its surface features. But it also endangers species that rely solely on these carcasses for survival. Some of these creatures, some of these sort of cleaning creatures on the bottom of the ocean that rely on dead whales to appear occasionally, these animals don't have food anymore in the same way that if all the large animals in Africa disappeared, well, then the hyenas and the vultures, the animals that eat them, wouldn't be around much longer either because they wouldn't have these carcasses, these dead bodies around, especially if they rely solely on these dead bodies, these carcasses for their food. Solely means basically only, to rely only on these carcasses. These are not animals that hunt on their own. These are animals that basically need these carcasses, these dead animals around to feed and sustain and survive.
Right, and moreover, the reduction in carbon storage, because the animals are no longer in the water and holding the carbon that has been caught from the air, is equivalent to cutting down millions of large trees, magnifying the climate crisis. So it's not only bad that we're cutting down trees on land, but if we're not allowing these whale falls to happen, then it is equivalent to cutting down millions of large trees, not just one, not just two. It is equal to, equivalent. And that means there are no more whales that are holding on to this carbon and making it better for our environment. And that in turn, because of this lack of whale fall, it is magnifying the climate crisis. Magnifying means to make really large, right? Here, if you think of taking out a magnifying glass and you look at the words on the book that you're reading, it will make the words really large. So it's a lot easier for you to be able to read them. But if you're magnifying the climate crisis, it means you're making it substantially larger, much larger than it originally was. And it makes sense that that's true. So what do you want to do about it? Well, it is imperative. It is absolutely necessary. There is no way that you cannot. It is imperative that we advocate, that we fight for the protection of whales by supporting whale conservation efforts. You know, the protection of the lives of whales, that whales are not dying off, that whales are not becoming endangered, that whales are not becoming extinct. That's a conservation effort. And promoting sustainable practices. So doing things better so that we don't continue to kill too many whales, maybe changing our shipping routes, maybe changing the areas where we fish so we don't disturb the habitats. These would be promoting sustainable practices. This is not just because they are wise and beautiful animals, but because in death they leave behind a valuable gift to our world, for our world. If we don't have these carbon storages that the whale falls create, then our world is in a much more dangerous situation with rising temperatures and other climate crises that are potentially caused by this increase in carbon in the air. All right, let's take a moment and listen to our Chinese teacher one last time.
接着第3题，请看第3段。前面提到，鲸鱼在一生当中平均能够从大气当中吸收33吨的二氧化碳，而且把它储存在体内，就像森林当中的大树一样。后面的句子说，在没有受到干扰的情况下，这些碳呢就会封存好几百、好几千年，在对抗全球暖化呢是相当有作用的。前后2个句子讲的都是 CO2， 为了保持句意连贯，我们不要有岔出的概念，所以最好的选择就是 C. When a whale perishes and sinks to the ocean floor, the absorbed carbon goes down with it. 这句话的意思是说，当鲸鱼死亡沉到海底，它所吸收的碳呢，也就跟着一起沉在海底了。所以第3题正确答案选 C。 再来是第4题了。好，我们看第4段。前面提到，然而人类的干扰，比方说商业的捕鲸，还有栖息地的破坏，让鲸鱼的数量迅速下滑。这不仅威胁到鲸落的频率和地理分布，也危及到完全依靠鲸鱼尸骸所生存的其他物种。那从前面我们可以看得出来，人类的行为导致鲸鱼数量大幅的减少，那鲸落的频率当然也会跟着降低。意思就是说，那现在存活的鲸鱼数量越来越少了嘛，那少了之后，当然将来鲸鱼死亡，鲸鱼的遗体的数量也没弄那么多了。那这会影响到其他的生物，因为有一些生物是需要依赖鲸鱼的尸体为生的，那随之而来的就是生态的多样性呢也会自然降低。那在这里我们就要找一个句子，同样的是要描述人类行为的负面影响，所以我们就选 E. Moreover, the reduction in carbon storage is equivalent to cutting down millions of large trees, magnifying the climate crisis. 意思就是说，此外碳存量的减少也相当于砍伐了好几百万棵的大树，让气候危机呢更加剧了。所以第4题正确的答案呢，我们应该要选 E。 好，这一篇鲸鱼的文章题型是篇章结构，希望透过老师刚刚的中文解题说明，让大家了解篇章结构解题技巧有哪一些。不过最重要的关键还是希望同学多多的练习，去熟悉解题的技巧。好，以上就是我们针对篇章结构所做的中文解题讲解。I'll see you next time. Bye bye.
I love whales. I think they're fascinating. I think that it is amazing that in their death they can sustain life on Earth, and just I cannot believe, I'm so in awe of how amazing their death is for human life, or for the life of society on land. It's pretty incredible, isn't it?
It is. That's absolutely amazing to know what goes on down there. I think even scientists, when they've actually been able to have, remote cameras way down there on the seafloor, and they find whale falls, which is very rare, of course, for us to be able to see them in action. I think even scientists are amazed at the creatures they see there. Sometimes they make new discoveries of new animals they've never seen before. So this is really an amazing thing that's been happening on the surface, or sorry, on the bottom of the ocean for millions and millions of years, and we're just starting to appreciate it and understand it. And that's just another reason to protect whales. There's so much about them that we don't know.
Thank you guys for looking into this topic with us today. For English Digest, I'm Leah.
And I'm Mike.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.